Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Mr. Productivity Podcast. On the show today, Barb Davids, a direct and ambitious digital marketing expert who helps small business owners maximize their online presence. When she's not empowering entrepreneurs with intentional marketing strategies, you might find Barb on an epic run with her Australian Kelpie, Stone, or diving into her latest self-improvement book. Barb, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate the time. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
You are someone who's all about intentional living. And I love the word intentionality because a lot of people are on autopilot. But I want to know, how do you structure your day to maximize your productivity?
That is a great question. It's taken me so many starts and stops to figure out what best way to do it. And I think it was just a matter of trying different things for a couple weeks and see if they stuck, see if they felt good. Right now, what I do is I make sure to take the first 2 or 3 hours in the morning for me. So it looks like reading a little bit, and then I do some meditation, and then I maybe do a run or do a workout, and then I get ready for the day. And then I do my client work, and then I do some of my business. And then sometimes, though, what I really like to understand about my day is that it's flexible. So I do try to make sure that, okay, if something needs to move, it's okay if it moves, so it doesn't freak out my brain and then be all like, oh my God, something changed. Because that's when I get into a panic.
You said something very interesting, and I want to make sure that the listener doesn't miss it. You said trial and error, because people come to me, and because I'm Mr. Productivity, and they go, oh, you got it all figured out. No, I'm constantly trying new things. My morning routine right now was not my morning routine 6 months ago because I continue to learn. I continue to watch educational videos. I continue to talk to people like Barb. I was on her podcast, and I'm always, oh, that's a great idea. So if you are struggling with your morning routine, your workday, your productivity, I want you to focus on the power of one. Don't change 7 things, change one thing, because here's the issue. If you change 3 things and you're like, oh, now I'm really productive. Oh, was it all 3? Was it 1? Was it 2 of the 3? Embrace trial and error, because that's how every successful person I'm aware of got to where they are. I love that you brought up trial and error, because you probably do things differently today than you did 6 months and a year ago, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to try to work a little bit before I worked. So I would try to get one thing done or one thing accomplished, but then I would keep working. And so I'm like, okay, well, that kind of defeats the purpose. But I also think it has to do with my mood and where I'm at in life at the time. So there are certain things that I want to do or not do, or recently I had an injury, so I wasn't running. So I had this whole extra hour, hour and a half, depending on the day. And so I would just get up and just do work earlier or try to do some other exercises instead. So I actually changed up that routine a little bit. So now I get the running back, and that's going to adjust again. So I do think there's a lot for not only your intention of what you want to get accomplished for the day, but what your mood is. And sometimes you just got to be yep, it's not happening today.
I encourage people to extend themselves grace. Like I said, I'm Mr. Productivity. Every day is not productive. I have some days that are more productive than others. Why? Because I'm a human being. You're going to feel not 100% mentally, spiritually, and physically, and you have to be okay with that and say, oh, you know what? This is just not going to be a good day, and be okay with that. A lot of people will beat themselves up. They'll start calling themselves names. I call it self-trash talking. And you got to be really careful about that, because if you start trash talking yourself, that's not going to make the problem better. It's going to make the problem worse, and it's probably going to make the problem last longer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot to self-talk. I used to joke. So did you ever watch Saturday Night Live with Stuart Smalley? And he's talking to himself, and I'm like, I believe in myself, and I like myself, and doggone it, people like you. And I used to just laugh at that. I thought, well, how weird is that? How are you talking to yourself? But affirmations are really important. And I think a lot of the books that I read, because I read so many of them, it just started seeping into my brain. And I didn't notice that at first when I first started reading them. But I think that there is something about the thoughts that we say to ourselves and what we're thinking, and it just, after a while, it takes hold. They start as little whispers. I like to think about it. There's just something in the back of your head. And then once you grab hold of it and then you keep thinking it, then that turns into an intention.
I once heard Tony Robbins talk about affirmations where he said, you have to be very careful because if you stand in front of the mirror and you are broke, you don't know how you're going to put gas in your tank, you don't know how you're going to feed yourself that day, you don't know how you're going to keep the lights on, and you look in the mirror, you look at yourself and go, I am wealthy, I'm a billionaire, and your brain's going, no, you're not. You're lying right now. So I think you need to be really careful about speaking affirmations, and they need to align where you are in life. Now, I think you should have big, hairy, audacious goals, but I think that's different than saying you're a billionaire when you don't have two pennies to rub together.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is the wording. And like for myself, for an example, I don't say that I'm wealthy, but I do say I have everything I need. I have more than everything I need. I am able to, forget what the other phrase is. I have to write them down so I can remember, but it's accepting where I'm at right now and using that in a positive way.
I like how you phrase that. So you're not lying to yourself saying that it's like someone who has cancer and they stand in front of the mirror and say, I don't have cancer. Yeah, you kind of still do.
Yeah.
You saying an affirmation is not going to make the cancer go, oh, I shouldn't be here. So I think you have to, I believe in affirmations, but I think they need to be rooted in reality. And I see a lot of people on the internet saying, whatever you say is going to be true. And like, well, no, it's not. My mom died of Alzheimer's. I could sit in front of the mirror and say, my mom doesn't have Alzheimer's. All I wanted, but she still had Alzheimer's and she still died from Alzheimer's. So I just think if you're going to say affirmations, make sure they're grounded in reality. Let's talk about you being direct. One of the things you told me before we did your interview, and we had a great conversation on that, you like being direct. So how is this trait, which can be, some people could take it the wrong way. How has this trait helped you be more efficient in your work with small business owners and your own life?
So personally, I think that's where sometimes people call me a bee or think I am when they first meet me.
Okay.
And that's okay.
I never thought that, by the way, just one of the record.
Well, I've worked on it a little bit, trying to soften that first punch. But like with business owners and working with my clients, it's very much appreciated because they know that if they have a question about what's happening with their marketing, that I'll give them the answer. And they'll be like, okay, well, can we try to do this? And I'll be like, no, we can't because of this. So being just very direct and not sugarcoating the fact that something isn't working or something is working. And I think that business owners can appreciate that. I know I did when I was working in corporate, and I think that's kind of where it came from. Also, my type A personality and being an oldest child and making sure everything is just right. But when I would hire out for companies like myself, I would not get the answers that I was looking for. So I got so frustrated because I had to report to other people. And I'm like, why can't you just tell me what you're working on? Or why can't you tell me how it works or whatnot? And that's where sort of the business, I guess, values come in for my business with my clients, just making sure that they get the answers that they're looking for so that they're not wondering like what is happening. And I think the not knowing is very unsettling, and having the answers to things, just no matter if it's good or bad, it feels better just to know.
I don't think you're serving anyone when you're beating around the bush. So I'm very direct with my clients as well. Or if someone DMs me on social media and asks me a question, because number one, when I'm direct like you, it saves time. I live in Houston. So if I wanted to go from Houston to Orlando, Florida, I wouldn't go from Houston to Los Angeles, to Japan, to Paris, to New York City, to Orlando. I would go from Houston to Orlando. And yes, it can come off as kind of aggressive, but when you're using me or Barb as a coach, you want someone who's going to give you the answers and move that needle forward to whatever your goals are. That's why Bill Belichick was such a powerful coach for the New England Patriots, because he didn't coddle people. He told them what he wanted done. And if you want to be successful, you have to take the proverbial bull by the horns. And sometimes that may not be comfortable when your coach says, no, what you're doing is not going to get you where you want to go. I know where you want to go. I can get you there, but I'm not going to coddle you with a blanket and some warm milk and some cookies, because that's going to waste your time. It's going to waste our time. So I think people who don't like people being direct, I think they need to zoom out and take a look at their life. Why don't you like people being direct to you? I mean, you get pulled over by a police officer, they're direct. They're not going to walk up to you and say, "Excuse me, lady, I hate to bother you." No, they're going to be direct. License and registration, please. So I think if you're struggling with people being direct, not rude, being direct, I think you need to investigate that. Maybe you need to go see someone, a therapist or someone at your church or something like that. But if that really offends you, I think you need to deal with that, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that because it feels like you're being attacked almost. And it might have something to do. And the only reason I say this is because I can relate to it a little bit when someone would tell me I was doing something wrong, or if they told me to do things a certain way, I'm like, I'm going to do it the way I want to. And so it might just have something to do with that perfectionism or that ego. It's trying to protect you from something that you think is true, right? Like it has to be this way because of something. And so I think, yeah, sitting with it and thinking about it is definitely something I would recommend.
Now, I mentioned in the introduction that you like reading. I am an avid reader too. I have a non-negotiable of reading at least 1 hour every day. But one of the issues I have with people who say, I read a lot too, reading's great, but you got to take what you have read and actually put it in action. Because I have a theory. If you read a self-development book, and so you spent the money on the book, you spent the time reading the book, but you don't apply it, what you've learned, I think you've wasted your time and your money. Do you agree with me?
I do agree. When I first started reading them, I never, ever do what they said because I was like, oh, this sounds really corny. I don't really want to sit here and say something to myself in the mirror 3 times every morning. I think it's silly. And that's just part of my inside saying, hey, that's not professional. That's not right, whatnot. And I still don't do that. I'll give them that. But there are certain things that are going to take and some things that aren't going to take. And so I think it's also a matter of finding the things that are going to resonate and that's going to sit with you out of all of those books, because that book was written from that perspective of that person. And so it works for them, but it doesn't always work for everybody. And I think that's why it's so important to read books and read different ones. And I used to think, oh my God, I'm reading so many of them. They're all the same thing. But they're not actually. They are in different perspectives and they have different angles to them usually. And so even if you pick up, I think, one thing out of a book, I think that's beneficial.
I think the goal should be pick up one thing. I agree with you. I remember my late parents used to have this enormous Bible, and the only thing they used it for is marriage and death notices. And my mom actually told me that she felt that having the Bible in her house protected her. And I had explained, because I'm a Christian, I said, Mom, that's not how it works. Okay. It's kind of like you have some kind of a bacterial infection and the doctor gives you antibiotics, but you leave it sit on your counter. Well, just because it's in your house, it's not going to take care of you. You actually have to take the medicine. So what is a book you have read recently? And it doesn't have to be like the last week, it could be like the last year, that you learned something that you applied and it really changed. It doesn't have to so much change your business life, but it changed some part of your life.
In terms of productivity, let me think. I'll take it from the business perspective. It's because that's the only one that is readily on my mind at the moment. And it was a book called Simple Marketing for Smart People. I think that's the name of it. It's by Billy Broas. And he broke down the information about how to do messaging. And I think the way that he broke that down really resonated with me compared to any other messaging books I've read so far. And in such a way that it really helped me streamline my content. And so it has probably saved me, I don't even know how many hours of agonizing time trying to figure out what to say and how to say it. And I think in terms of business productivity, this really helped me because I knew my audience and I knew what their problems were, because I'm not good with words, it just wasn't coming out right a lot of the time with my socials or anything else. So I have a copywriter for my blog post for that reason. But having this messaging framework, it was done in a way different way than I've ever read, and it's thus saved me time. So I think that's another benefit to keep reading books, to find something that actually hits, because at some point, this one just came out of the blue and I was like, where has this book been all of my entire life? So that is one that really took. And then the one I'm reading right now, Finding the Joy in Productivity, I forget who it's named by, but I wasn't going to read it. So I'm very much, unfortunately, I judge a book by its cover and the title. And sometimes they're just so corny sounding. And for some reason, I can't understand why it's okay to have the joy in productivity. But the things that it talks about, it wasn't as frou-frou as I thought. And I think that's the important thing too. Don't judge a book by its cover, because the reason that they put those titles is because it's resonating with them, or it's resonating with most of their audience. But like the inside of this book has so much more tactical, non-floofy stuff for me that I was like, oh, I almost passed it up just because of the way it was titled.
Books have so much power. One of my all-time favorite books is The 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. I went from a night owl to getting up between 4:30 and 5, and it is possible to do. Now, I will say this, little caveat here. Getting up at 5 a.m. is not magic. It's getting up at 5 a.m. and having a plan. That's where the magic is. So if you just think getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, which if you told me 10 years ago I'd be doing that, I'm just like, you're crazy. Go to the mental institutions. But I did, and I am super productive because I get up that early in the morning. And I just want people to understand, like you mentioned, if you just take one thing out of every book you read and implement it, you're going to be well ahead of the game, because most people don't even read half a book a year. Half a book a year. Think about that. Listener, how many books do you read a year? And I'm not talking fiction books. I mean, nonfiction books. So let's talk about our love for running. Mm-hmm. As I shared numerous times on my podcast, I started running on August 29, 2017, and I have not missed a single day. And this is such an integral part of my day that when we had the freak winter storm in February of 2021, when it was 15 degrees for 3 days in a row here in Houston, Texas, I actually ran in my house. And then I was doing 5Ks. And on that Wednesday, I was running at 5 a.m. at that time, by the way. We lost power. Well, I grabbed my flashlight and I continued running my 5K in my house. I share that with you not to brag. I share that with the listeners that I don't accept excuses. When people say I don't have time, well, I immediately go right toward the jugular, which is known as social media. I love running. Sometimes when I run, I don't have headphones on, which means I'm running naked, or I'll listen to a podcast or an audiobook or music. I just love running at first light. Now, we're recording this on October 14th. First light, 7 a.m., which drives me nuts. When you get up at 4:30 in the morning, you can't go running till 7. It's like really nerve-wracking.
It's a big difference.
I've been running over 7.5 years now, approaching 2,600 days, which is absolutely insane. I know you said you couldn't run for a while because you had health issues. I'm one of these morons. I'll still run if my legs aren't amputated. I'm still going to run. I probably should have taken some days off, but I'm weird like that. So how long have you been running?
I've been running since, I think it was 2008 or 2009. And so I started because I was walking on the treadmill. Well, first I went through a divorce and I gained a crap ton of weight when I was married. I went through the divorce and then I lost a lot of weight. I looked anorexic. It was so bad. Wow. And then after that, I gained it all back. And I thought, oh, I can't gain all it back. So I started going on the treadmill and just walking in the exercise room. I got bored of that. And then so I started running on the treadmill. I got bored of that. And then I decided to take it to the road. And at the time I was in Minneapolis. And that first run that I went out there, it was like a couple miles just on the road trying to get comfortable with it. And I was just so amazed at the feeling that I got when I wasn't trying to look for that and I wasn't expecting that, but I just got this really, I wouldn't say euphoric. I think that's a little over exaggerated, but I would say it was a very calm feeling and it just, wow, that was really nice. So then I started road running. And then I can't remember what year I did a half marathon. Must have been a year later or 2 years later. I didn't train for it at all. And it's so funny. I had the worst chafing in my legs. And this last about month ago, I was running and I took a turn, and I run with my dog usually now. And I took a turn and I was so worried about the geese that were happening and the dog over here, although he was behind me because I do really well with training him to stay behind. And somehow I managed to like turn and like fall. And I landed like literally my entire body weight went on my right knee. It's still trying to heal, but it was so bad that I went in, and thankfully I didn't need stitches. but then I couldn't bend it. I couldn't move it. And so that's why I was out for, I guess it's been a month now. And I just started a couple days ago, and it was really nice.
Wow. Yeah, I've had several spills out running. And fortunately, I have never, of course, I'm a guy, so I'm stubborn, but I've fallen. I have something called vestibular nerve disorder, so I have no balance whatsoever because I fell on some black ice when I lived in New York State. So I have to run on concrete trails. So when I fall, it's not like running on grass or sand. I'm getting scraped up. And my most recent fall was where there's a trail and there's a little part where it's grassy I had to run on. And one of the grass thing was curved up like a wave and my toe hit that and I fell down. I said some words I would never say on the podcast. But what's funny is this is where my mind went. The first thing wasn't, am I okay? The first thing, I run carrying my Glock 17. Made sure that was still in my holster because I don't want that flying out just for a whole host of reasons. Then I got up and I was bleeding a little bit, but my wife rolls her eyes because I texted her. I fell. I'm running home. She, of course you are. Why instead of calling me to come pick you up, why would you just run home? Because that's I'm kind of stubborn like that. But I've run, the most painful time I've run is when I had something called a thrombosed hemorrhoid. And yes, it is as painful as you imagine it to be because I was not going to stop my run streak. I've run when I've had back issues, knee pain. Again, I'm a man, probably shouldn't have, but starting over at 1 again keeps me going. So I'm not recommending that to anybody, okay? My wife rolls her eyes every time when I get injured. She goes, I know you're going to go out running tomorrow. Yep, I am.
Yeah.
So I just love running. But let's talk about downtime because I don't consider running downtime. You may consider downtime. I'm one of these people, I don't like working wall to wall throughout the day. I like working, taking a break. Like when I'm done with this interview, I'll go outside, take my shoes and socks off, ground for a little bit, maybe do some reading, play around with my dog or something like that. I like work, break, work, break, work, break. So I like these mini downtimes throughout my day. How do you handle downtime?
I'm almost a recovering workaholic. I'll tell you that. So I don't handle it very well still. I have to force myself to stop and take a break for lunch. So I've been nomading for the past year and learning a lot about myself that I never knew before. And I will say that before the nomading and maybe a little bit before that, I didn't even think I had emotions, quite frankly. I was very non-emotional at all. And I thought I had to work like all the time. And if I wasn't working, then it was wrong. So finding downtime has been extremely difficult for me. And so, for example, I was in Minnesota 3 months ago, a couple weeks ago, but for 3 months. And I got to go golfing with my dad every other week. And I thought, this is great downtime, right? Taking a whole 3 hours to be with my dad. We do 9 holes and just sit and chit chat. Well, the first time I went, it was excruciating in that, I mean, I had a great time, don't get me wrong, but my mind was always on business and I couldn't relax as much as I probably should have and just been in the moment. Now, we had done that every other week for 3 months. So by the time I was done there, the last few times, it was much easier to have the downtime and just relax and be in the moment. But it took some work to do that. And the same thing with lunch breaks. I used to work through lunch breaks all the time. And only just recently can I speak to the fact that I've had to make myself not work and either just read or watch a mind-numbing, like whatever, Schitt's Creek, because I just love that show. I'll sit and watch a Schitt's Creek just so I don't have to think about work. So it's definitely a practice. And I've had to sit and ask myself, okay, well, I do have emotions. I do have feelings. So now I'm like, okay, if I start feeling myself get worked up, I think, okay, well, why? That helps out a lot because especially like when I was doing the golfing and I felt anxious, like, oh my God, I got to check my email or got to do that. I'm like, no, I don't. Just don't do it. And it was a recurring method to talk myself into downtime.
I just finished reading a book. I recommend everybody pick this book up. If you're on audio, it's John Mark Comer's. I'm trying to read it. It's backwards. The Relentless Elimination of Hurry. Now,
that sounds like a good one.
Full disclosure, it is a Christian-based book, but you're going to get value out of it if you are atheist or agnostic or some other faith. The point is, we are always in a hurry to go to the next thing. We go from Facebook to Instagram to TikTok to X to LinkedIn to YouTube. And the whole point of the book is to slow down. We get one shot at this thing called life. Why are we rushing to life? I remember when I was a kid, couldn't wait to get to high school, couldn't wait to get to college, couldn't wait to move out, and so couldn't get to married, couldn't wait to have kids, couldn't wait till they're out of their house. We're always in a hurry. And the book is all about slow down. One of the things I started doing, because you mentioned meditation earlier, one of the things I've always had a love-hate relationship with meditating. And so I'm always trying different things. What I have done, I have an Apple Watch and it's got something called the mindfulness app on there. And one of the things I do is I take my print journal outside and I'll start the meditating app, but I'm not really meditating. What I'm doing is I'm journaling. That's how I am doing the meditating. So instead of focusing on the breath, I'm focusing what I'm journaling about. And I can tell you, when I finish doing this, I feel a lot more calm because I don't have to worry about anything else going on. When you go into the mindfulness app on your Apple Watch, it silences all notifications. Nobody can call you, no pop-up notifications, and I can just focus. So instead of focusing on the breath, I'm focusing on whatever I want to journal about. So I'd like to know how you approach meditation.
It's been a love-hate relationship. So I have been trying to do it for probably the past 4 years on a regular basis. I've only recently gotten good at it. Good is relative, right? Like I've been doing it more consistently on a regular basis in the morning because it just sets the tone for the day. I've also been trying to do non-guided. So I've taken it from guided to non-guided with music, without music. I keep trying different things. And again, it's going to depend on my mood. My mood really does a lot for a lot of these things. But I think one thing that I thought about it was that I had to stop thinking and not have thoughts. And that's where I was like this, like, I can't do it. I can't sit still. I can't keep my thoughts out of the way. But that's okay, because that's actually the intention, is to understand what your thoughts are and then just be like, oh, okay, those are thoughts. And then move on to thinking about nothing again. So it's about training your brain to stop thinking about those thoughts or to change the thoughts when you see it. So if I start thinking about what am I going to have for lunch today, I'm like, oh, I don't care right now. Never mind. And then I come back to it. And then from Tanessa Shears, somewhere too, but I can't remember where, is to sit and just think about the moment that you're in and what you're doing. And so like, for example, when I'm walking my dog, a lot of the times I'll like to listen to a podcast. And sometimes I stop doing that just so I can be like, okay, I'm walking my dog and I'm only focusing on that one thing. So if you just focus on one thing, that in and of itself is kind of like meditation. Kind of like with the running, it's kind of meditative in a sense, because like I'll lose track of time. That's what I kind of think meditation is. So like golf for me is a form of meditation, because I lose track of all time. I'm in the moment. I'm not thinking about anything else nowadays, right? In the beginning I wasn't, but that or being on the water is another one for me. Like if I'm sitting on a boat and I have nothing else to do, I can just sit and be there. Even my drives now are kind of like that, like in traffic. I don't think about that I'm not getting somewhere fast enough. I think, okay, I can't control this. So I just either sit there and wait, or it's just taking something, one thing. And that's kind of, I guess, the way I look at it.
That's a very good point you brought up about running, because I feel when I'm running naked, in other words, without headphones, it is a form of meditation, because I can't scroll on social media. It's just me and nature. And I think people need to get out of their mind that the only way to meditate is to be in the lotus position. That's not the only way to do it. Right. There's multiple ways. And I think we all have to find what is that way that maybe you don't call it meditation. But I think we need to spend time every day as humans being quiet. When I say being quiet, I don't mean quietly scrolling through TikTok. I mean, do nothing. Cal Newport talks about it in one of his books, Embrace the Boredom. I remember when there was no cell phones. And when you're in a long checkout line or you're at the Department of Motor Vehicles, you had to be bored. Now, if we're bored for a second, we whip out our phones, because God forbid if we are bored for a couple minutes. But I think that's healthy. I think in our age of go, 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 I think being bored is a really good thing for not only your mindset, but also your productivity.
Yeah, I think we have trouble with it, or at least I can speak to myself. I don't know how other people deal with it, but like I always feel like I had to be busy. and working and productive. And I think that was to mask any thoughts that I had that were about myself. So self-defeating thoughts in a sense. And so those kind of come up and come to play, like, why didn't I do this? Why shouldn't I done that? Or I should be here. I should do that. Those are kind of the things that come up when I let boredom get to me, and I have to get out of that and like reframe it, and then just come back around and just be like, I guess that's where you kind of come into the changing your thoughts. So you don't keep thinking that, but it does take some time. It is okay with the boredom, but it is so hard.
It is. Yeah. And I don't think it's going to get worse because we have all these dopamine hits known as social media. I actually did something drastic a couple weeks ago. I actually deleted Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I don't mean I deleted them off my phone. I'm deleting my accounts because number one, never got a lead off them. Number two, never got anybody signed up for my email newsletter. So I'm focusing on LinkedIn, and my favorite platform is Snapchat because that's where the fun is. And I'm not Gary Vaynerchuk. I do not have 15 people on my social media team. Now, maybe someday I will go back to these platforms. I highly doubt it now. I'm 59 years young and people are very successful. Cal Newport's not on social media at all, and he does pretty well. So you don't need social media. I'm just saying. So, Barb, I want to thank you for your being on the show today, sharing a little bit of how you get productive, how you get things done. I love talking to people like you because I don't have all the answers. And I guarantee you someone listening to this show picked up something that you said and go, never thought about that. And if we help just one person, to me, it's a successful download. So where can people go to find out more about Barb and what she's doing in the world?
That is super easy. Just go to compassdigitalstrategies.com. Very direct.
Say that one more time.
compassdigitalstrategies.com.
Okay. And she is a person that's all about marketing. This is not a marketing podcast. That's why we didn't talk about that. But if you are interested in learning, hey, my marketing's not working, I just reach out to Barb and say, hey, can we get on a call, or what services do you have to offer? Just go to her website. And when you get done with that, I have two requests for you. First of all, go to MrProductivity.com, of course, MISTER, MrProductivity.com. Second of all, if you are on Spotify, do me a favor. You're supposed to be able to send me a comment on Spotify, and I haven't been pushing this. Now, if you're listening to Apple Podcasts or Overcast or iHeartRadio, you can't do it. But if you are on Spotify, you can send me a comment. I just want to get my first comment. I think it'd be really cool. I'm just trying to play something around on that. So I really appreciate it if you do that. Thank you so much for your time and attention, for listening to this episode or watching if you're on Spotify or YouTube. Really appreciate you. And until next time, be productive. And most importantly, stay positive.